So, boxing is very, very busy at present, and as one fight week ends, as you guys know, another fight week begins. And we had several versions of the World Heavyweight Championship being contested last week between Anthony Joshua and Carlos Takam. Covered that fairly extensively over the weekend on the channel. Now it's time to look ahead to next weekend, where we have the WBC Heavyweight title being contested between Deontay Wilder, reigning champion, 38-0, and Bermane-Stiverne. The rematch, a rematch that, to be honest, a lot of us wouldn't have expected to be seeing. The guys met initially in January 2015, so we're having a rematch well, it's nearly 3 years afterwards. But anyway, we'll get to that later on in the video, I'm sure. Another fight. Boxing's been hit with a few of these recently, but another fight that's been made at extremely late notice. Initially, Deontay Wilder was scheduled to fight Luis Ortiz, but Bermane-Stiverne has had to step in due to the circumstances that have affected Luis Ortiz that have been covered elsewhere. Bermane-Stiverne was due to fight on this card. He was due to fight on the undercard against Dominic Breazeale, so he was getting ready for a big fight on this date against a tall opponent. So it's not a situation like Takam Joshua, where Takam's been plucked straight from a Monaco bill where he was fighting TBA to a huge world title fight. He was expecting to fight on this night against a highly ranked tall opponent. So hopefully Stiverne will be ready and the late notice won't come into it as an excuse. But there we are. Bermane-Stiverne, let's talk about the first fight. When the first fight was made, believe it or not, it was a long time ago now, I actually favoured Bermane-Stiverne to win the first fight. I liked what I saw in Deontay Wilder as he was climbing the pro ranks, but Deontay Wilder to me was very raw, very green, making a lot of basic errors, and I think I actually came on this channel and picked Bermane-Stiverne to beat him. I thought Bermane-Stiverne would be too experienced, too accurate, too well timed, and I thought he'd catch Deontay Wilder coming in and have the power to take Wilder out of there. But I was wrong, and Wilder proved me and many others wrong in decisive fashion that night, winning by a very, very clear UD. The only UD of Deontay Wilder's career. All of his other fights have ended in stoppage. In my opinion, the first fight was a thoroughly one-sided fight. It would be hard to score Bermane-Stiverne a round or two, really, and Wilder proved conclusively the better man. Afterwards, I believe Bermane-Stiverne came out with several explanations for his performance, including the fact that he was dehydrated, which always seemed a slightly bizarre reasoning to me on the basis that he is a heavyweight and not really needing to cut water to make weight for the fight. But anyway, there you go. Deontay Wilder really surprised me in the first Bermane-Stiverne fight. He actually adopted the long back foot boxer approach. He had Stiverne chasing him around the ring. Wilder got on his bike, he used a lot of lateral movement, he stuck to ABC boxing and flicked out a long 1-2 for large portions of the fight. And really, Wilder won this fight conclusively on his back foot. I still believe, actually, that in his career to date, this is probably the top performance of Deontay Wilder's career. It was a calmer performance, a more disciplined performance, a sort of sensible boxing first approach performance. And even though we've had a few good performances from Wilder since, I actually think the Stiverne win still represents the pinnacle of his career, both in terms of what he achieved in terms of the form, but also in terms of what he achieved in terms of the eye test. You know, he looked really, really calm, well structured in there. Subsequent to that, he's kind of gone back to some of his more wild methods, where he's, lost a few rounds here and there, and had to rely on his power to get him through fights. But the Stiverne fight was a particular peak, and you kind of wonder if Deontay Wilder always has that kind of performance in his locker, but he only brings it out when he senses a real threat. Stiverne, for my money, in the first fight looked too old, too slow, particularly in terms of foot speed. He really struggled to cut down the ring on Wilder. He really struggled to get his work off in meaningful fashion, specifically in terms of meaningful volume. And for me, Wilder, was conclusively the better guy. Now, Stiverne did have one or two spells of success. There were one or two notable power punches he landed on Wilder, but what was at the time a surprise to me is that Wilder's chin appeared to hold up relatively well under the circumstances. I don't recall seeing Wilder rocked or hurt or, you know, anything like that. So here we go. So the question is, can Stiverne do any better in the lead up to the second fight? Now, clearly he'll have learned his lesson about going into a heavyweight fight dehydrated, if you put too much merit behind that excuse. And I expect to see a fully refreshed and hydrated Bermane Stiverne ahead of this rematch. But putting that to one side, can he, you know, come back? Can he outbox Deontay Wilder? Can he find a punch to stop Deontay Wilder? I'm dubious. And the reason for that is there's actually, in my opinion, quite a lot against Bermane Stiverne in this fight. You know, for me, as I said, he was made to look decidedly one-paced, quite slow, a bit plodding against Wilder last time out. Well, he's actually been very, very inactive since that fight. He fought Wilder in Jan 15. Subsequent to that, he fought Derek Rossi November 15, and he looked pretty terrible in that fight. You know, he stumbled to a unanimous decision. He won that by the skin of his teeth. If I recall, Derek Rossi actually put him down badly in that fight, and you know, the punch resistance he showed against Deontay Wilder didn't seem to be there when he fought Derek Rossi. Now, even more worryingly than that, he's now spent 2 years out of the ring post that Derek Rossi fight, so he hasn't been an active heavyweight in any sense since November 15, and his last fight against, you know, a top 50 opponent was probably was definitely his last fight against Deontay Wilder. So going to be a very, very tough ask for Bermane Stiverne, because if you're looking for him to increase in terms of speed, athleticism, agility, foot speed, which for me would be the key elements of his game he'd need to improve to have success against Deontay Wilder, then we're having to say that we're hoping that he's improved those attributes despite being highly inactive, and despite now being, I guess he's going to be 39 years old, certainly 38 or 39, I'm guessing, by the time he steps in the ring with Deontay Wilder. So, you know, it's a tough ask for Bermane Stiverne. He's coming back nearly 3 years older. He's coming back having been heavily inactive, and he's coming back, you know, he's been the kind of guy who's put on weight before between fights. So let's see how he looks coming into this fight. I'm sceptical as to whether he will have improved. If we look at Bermane Stiverne's actual resume on way up, it is possible, with the benefit of hindsight, that we can say that maybe he was a little bit overrated on the way up. You know, I was one of these guys who actually rated Stiverne quite highly prior to that Wilder fight. But looking back on it, you know, you got 2 wins over Chris Arreola, an ageing Ray Austin. You know, he beat an unbeaten Kirsten Manswell, but he's since become like a journeyman type figure. You know, when you actually read through Stiverne's box rec, there's actually very little in the way of substantive form. You know, the Chris Arreola form is, you know, fringe. I guess he's beaten Arreola twice. He's beaten Arreola when Arreola was a bigger, better name. But essentially, that's the kind of form that, you know, may justify a ranking in the top 20, top 15 of the heavyweight division, but no higher. So, you know, I'm wondering, looking back on it, was Stiverne slightly overrated to begin with? You know, was Wilder in against the guy who wasn't quite as dangerous as people like myself thought he was? And, you know, certainly I'm wondering if all the inactivity and, you know, the aging will have helped, because for me there seemed to be a real substantial athletic gap between the two, and there seemed to be a real substantial speed gap between the two, and I just don't think that's a gap that can be ironed out with aging and inactivity. In terms of a tactical approach to this fight, I'd like to see Stiverne really try and get Wilder to come to him in this fight. As I've mentioned, in fight 1, Wilder is allowed to box on his back foot. He's allowed to use distance, range. He's allowed to control the pace of the fight for large portions. And really, you've got Bermane Stiverne, who is this slightly slow, unathletic figure, trying to cut down the ring on him. I think it would be to Stiverne's benefit if he actually drew Wilder onto him. You know, Wilder is very, very raw still when he looks to take opponents out and when he looks to put punches together. You know, I'd like to see Stiverne almost looking to draw him in, lead him onto punches to counter him. You know, Stiverne's got that kind of style. He can at times be a bit slick. He can at times have good timing, good accuracy when he needs it. And I do think if he made Wilder chase him, you know, if he refused to walk Wilder down and made Wilder come to him, then it may be his best chance in the fight. Now, of course, there are risks there. What you don't want is Stiverne up against the ropes like this with the bigger man who's got the more range teeing off from distance with his powerful 1-2. You want to make it a fight where Stiverne can close down that gap and, you know, use his counter punching to good effect. So it's a tough game to play. You know, I know it's a lot easier to sit here on my sofa with the peeling wallpaper and tell you guys what Bermane-Stiverne should do, but I just don't think Bermane-Stiverne can adopt the same tactics that he tried and failed to adopt all those years ago. So I think it's a tough ask for Bermane-Stiverne this. Being completely frank, I'll say it how I see it. It's not the rematch that I was hoping for of the rematches out there. This is one that I was less excited for. The first fight was fairly dominant for my money. And, you know, it's not like Bermane-Stiverne has been on a chilling run of knockouts since. It looks like he's improved loads. If anything, there's reason to suggest that he may even have regressed. So, you know, I'll see how this fight goes. But I would be surprised in anything other but a Wilder win. And to be frank, I'm actually going to say that I am going to predict Wilder to win this fight by KO. I just don't think Stiverne can come in off a 2-year layoff, having, you know, at the stage of his career he is now in his late 30s, and go from a fight where he looked terrible against Derek Rossi to mixing it with a guy like Wilder, who possibly has improved and certainly has lost none of the athleticism and speed, etc., that was evident in the first fight. So I'm going to pick Stiverne by Stiverne. I'm going to pick Wilder to knock out Stiverne. You know, Stiverne will be tough, I'm sure. You know, he's shown good punch distance in the past, but the fact he was dropped so heavily against Derek Rossi is a big source of concern for me. He took such a beating that first fight against Deontay Wilder. It really was a pretty brutal beating at times. He took a lot of punishment, and you just wonder if you know, that put a lot of miles on his clock, and whether some of that punch resistance won't be so evident in the second fight with Wilder that takes place this Saturday. So, you know, that's my thoughts on the matchup. You've now got Dominic Breazeale versus Eric Molina on the undercard, so another heavyweight matchup there. We'll probably run through that on the podcast on Wednesday. Let's wait till how this fight goes. Then I might redo my BG top 30 heavyweight list that I do sporadically on the channel. You know, wanted to see how Hughie Fury Parker went, how Joshua Takam went. Let's see how this fight goes, and then let's maybe revisit that list and do a few videos, maybe 3 videos, top 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30 off the back of this fight. But yeah, interesting times. I'm finding it hard to see the result as different to the first fight. You know, if Stiverne had come out and proved a load of stuff since the first fight, if he'd been active, if he'd shown his well-being, then I'd, you know, maybe reconsider. But if anything, it's been the opposite. Let me know your thoughts, guys. As always, please leave your comments in the section below. If you haven't done so already, do subscribe. I'll be sure to do a post-fight reaction video to this fight, so please hit subscribe so you can check that out. And if you haven't already done so, please hit the thumbs up button, which will mean more visibility gets to this video. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for watching the channel.